In the vast expanse of the galaxy, a council of ancient beings sat in a chamber that spanned across the heart of the Galactic Empire. Their eyes glowed with the wisdom of countless millennia, and their voices resonated with the power of cosmic knowledge. They had conquered every world they'd encountered. They had defeated species more advanced than humanity, and ruled entire star systems with an iron fist. But now there was a new concern in their midst, something that troubled even their seasoned minds. A message had arrived from the Joreth, a race as old as the stars themselves, who had once been the Empire's greatest allies, but now were nothing more than an afterthought. The Joreth had always been calm, reserved, their wisdom unchallenged across the galaxy. But today they were not the same. The message that reached the council was filled with urgency, panic even. The hologram flickered to life before the council. A Joreth emissary stood tall, his alien features sharp and regal, his voice steady, but filled with an edge of fear. They had been watching the humans, he said, a species of no remarkable origin, no advanced technology, no lasting influence. And yet they were growing stronger, faster than anyone could have imagined. Their ships, which once seemed insignificant, now struck with the precision of a sharpened blade. They had survived against all odds, and what should have been their weakness, their reckless nature, had instead become their greatest strength. The Joreth had warned the Empire repeatedly that humanity was a threat, but their warnings had gone ignored. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had challenged the Empire's might and emerged victorious on several occasions. Each victory spurred the humans onward, more determined, more inventive. They fought not just with weapons, but with a spirit that was almost unbreakable. They had crossed the boundaries of their own world and had already begun to set foot into the stars with a hunger for knowledge and power. The Joreth described humans as a force of nature, something unpredictable like a storm or an earthquake. They did not follow the rules of war, nor did they play by the Empire's established codes. They fought with ingenuity and passion. Their ships were often inferior in size and technology, but they'd made up for it in their determination and willpower. They could not be broken, they could not be stopped, and worst of all, they did not fear death. Their warriors would fight to the last breath for their people and their cause. The Joreth warned that humanity was not a species to be dismissed or underestimated, because if left unchecked, they would rise up and eventually challenge the very core of the Empire. The council listened carefully as the message played out, but their reaction was far from what the Joreth had hoped for. They were skeptical. They had faced insurrections before, crushed rebellions on countless worlds, and dealt with species far more dangerous than the humans would ever be. The Empire had survived for millennia, and a small race of upstarts would hardly be enough to bring it down. The council's leader, a towering figure of power and intellect, chuckled at the message, dismissing it as nothing more than the ramblings of a paranoid race who feared the unknown. The Joreth had always been cautious, perhaps too cautious, he said, turning his attention to the rest of the council. They had underestimated the humans once, and they would do so again. The council agreed. The message was clear, but they saw no reason to act on it. Yet the Joreth's warning was brushed aside, and the threat of humanity was deemed unworthy of concern. The Galactic Empire had ruled the stars for centuries, and its leadership was built on an unwavering belief in its own superiority. They had conquered countless worlds, crushed rebellion after rebellion, and crushed any who dared challenge their authority. To them, the Joreth's warning was nothing more than an echo in the void, a baseless claim from a race that had long since lost its former glory. They saw the humans as a minor nuisance, something easily dealt with by the vast might of the Empire's military force. After all, humanity was still a fledgling species, their technology far behind the Empire's vast arsenal of weapons and ships. The Council believed the humans had no chance against them, and dismissed the warning as a mere blip in their galactic surveillance. The council leader, the cold, calculating figure with a reputation for ruthlessness, stood at the head of the table. His voice was steady as he addressed the assembled generals and advisors, dismissing the Joreth's fears with little more than a wave of his hand. The humans, he said, were nothing more than a handful of primitive beings who had somehow managed to survive their own world's turmoil. He motioned for a tactical officer to provide a report on humanity's capabilities, but even the data presented confirmed their weakness. Their fleets were small, their weapons barely comparable to the Empire's most basic models. Their colonization efforts were still in their infancy compared to the Empire's grand designs for galactic dominance. A few of the younger officers spoke up in favor of caution, arguing that it was better to be prepared for any potential threat rather than risk underestimating it, but they were quickly silenced. The leader scoffed at the notion of a human uprising and ordered that no further attention be given to the matter. Their resources were better spent focusing on more significant threats, such as the growing tensions with the Gorgeth or the unpredictable behavior of the newly discovered Zelkeri race. The humans were nothing more than a distraction, nothing that warranted further action. Despite this decision, there was a lingering sense of unease among some of the council members, but they dared not speak out against the established leadership. The Empire had conquered countless worlds without breaking a sweat, and the idea that an unremarkable species like humanity could challenge their dominance seemed laughable, even as rumors of human skirmishes with smaller factions spread across the galaxy. The council refused to entertain the possibility that the humans could pose a real threat. As the meeting drew to a close, the council leader reaffirmed the Empire's strategy to ignore the human threat. They would continue their surveillance of humanity's movements, but would not engage unless absolutely necessary. He reassured the council that there was no need for concern. After all, the Empire had dealt with countless species that had once seemed formidable only to be crushed under the weight of its power. The humans would be no different, he said with certainty. The decision was made, and the fate of humanity was sealed for the time being. The Empire turned its attention to other matters, and the warning from the Shoreth was soon forgotten like so many others before it. In the cold silence of space, the humans continued to grow, unaware that the very leaders who had dismissed them as insignificant were the ones who would one day bear witness to their unstoppable rise. The vastness of the galaxy was both a blessing and a curse for the Empire. Their fleets stretched across countless star systems, their reach nearly infinite, yet in the deep reaches of space, small and seemingly insignificant anomalies often went unnoticed. The humans, however, had become impossible to ignore. The Empire's surveillance networks picked up strange activity along the outer rim of their domain, a region largely ignored until now. It wasn't much at first, just a few scattered human colonies, barely a blip on the radar of galactic power. But the humans were growing bolder. One quiet cycle, a routine patrol of the Empire's flagship, the Regent, was ordered to intercept a convoy of human ships making their way through a distant sector. The convoy, numbering only a handful of ships, was transporting critical resources from a newly colonized planet. These were not battle-ready ships, but merchant vessels, ill-equipped for any kind of confrontation. The Empire's commanders saw them as easy pickings, a chance to remind humanity of their place in the grand order of things. The Regent's fleet moved in quickly, calculating the attack with cold precision. Its fleet was led by Admiral Haxar, a battle-hardened commander who had overseen countless victories against smaller, less developed species. He had heard of the humans, of course, but considered them a mere distraction. This would be nothing more than a simple operation to wipe out a handful of insignificant ships and secure their resources. He ordered his fleet to engage, confident in the Empire's overwhelming superiority. What happened next caught Haxar completely off guard. The humans did not flee. They did not panic. Instead, they fought back. The first salvo of plasma fire from the Regent's fleet struck one of the human ships, causing an explosion that sent debris scattering through space. But the remaining ships did not scatter in terror. They immediately retaliated, launching a flurry of missiles and firing laser cannons with pinpoint accuracy, targeting weak points in the Empire's vessels that no one would have thought to exploit. Admiral Haxar's fleet retaliated in full force, but something strange began to happen. The human ships were faster than anticipated, darting and weaving through the vastness of space with a level of agility that the Empire's ships, with their superior technology, could not match. They didn't fight with the brute force of the Empire. Instead, they used their wits, playing to their strengths, exploiting every opening, every vulnerability. One human ship, barely half the size of the smallest Imperial destroyer, managed to slip behind the Regent's flagship and fired a volley that disabled a critical communication system. In that moment, the Regent's fleet lost their ability to coordinate their attacks, giving the humans a window to strike back even harder. Haxor's officers scrambled to regain control, but it was too late. The humans had shown them something terrifying: resilience and unpredictability. The convoy, once thought to be an easy target, had inflicted real damage on the Empire's fleet. Within hours, the Regent and its accompanying ships were forced to retreat, humiliated. The human convoy, though battered, managed to escape with a few ships intact. Haxor, furious and confused, relayed his report back to the Empire's leadership. He had never expected such resistance from what he had assumed to be an insignificant species. The humans had fought like cornered animals, determined to protect what was theirs. Back at the Empire's central command, the report was met with silence. The leaders had dismissed the Joreth's warning, but this event forced them to confront an uncomfortable truth. The humans were not the weaklings they had assumed. They had underestimated them, and now they had paid the price. Admiral Haxor's fleet had suffered a defeat, and for the first time in decades, the Empire was forced to reevaluate its assumptions about humanity. The question that now lingered was simple but unsettling. How far would these humans go? The events surrounding the Regent's humiliating retreat spread quickly through the Empire's ranks. While the higher-ups attempted to downplay the incident, whispers of the human threat began to circulate. A defeat like that was not something easily swept under the rug, especially not when it came at the hands of a species that the Empire had once written off as inconsequential. Soon after the report of the attack, Imperial intelligence began to focus more intently on humanity, dispatching more ships to monitor their activities in the Outer Rim. What the Empire's commanders hadn't anticipated was the speed with which humanity adapted. The humans didn't just defend themselves. They learned from their mistakes and grew stronger after every encounter. Despite their limited resources, their technological advancements were rapid, and they quickly proved to be more resourceful and determined than the Empire had ever imagined. Within weeks, humanity began to escalate their attacks against Imperial interests, launching hit-and-run strikes against supply convoys and smaller military outposts, forcing the Empire's fleet to divert resources and attention from other campaigns. The humans weren't relying solely on their ships. They began to utilize guerrilla tactics, using their ingenuity and a deep understanding of their environments to launch strikes in ways the Empire had never seen. They would attack outposts on distant moons or asteroid fields, places the Empire considered insignificant. And each time, they did more than just cripple the Empire's forces. They left behind messages, graffiti, and symbols that taunted the Empire's superiority. "We are everywhere." One such message read, scrawled across the wreckage of an Imperial command station. "You are not invincible." The Empire's military leaders, at first dismissive of these sporadic assaults, were now forced to take them seriously. They began to organize more substantial campaigns to deal with the humans, but every time they moved against them, the humans shifted their tactics, adapting faster than the Empire could react. The humans' fleet, though still small compared to the Empire's, was becoming more effective, more disciplined. Human fighters and starships, while not technologically advanced by Imperial standards, were increasingly modified with new, unorthodox weaponry, often scavenged from the very wreckage left by the Empire's failed attacks. The tensions grew. Soon, the Empire found itself stretched thin. Their forces engaged in skirmishes on multiple fronts as humanity began to form alliances with other alien races in the Outer Rim. The Gorgeth, once allies of the Empire, were growing wary of the increasingly aggressive Imperial stance. The Zelkiris, a race of highly intelligent strategists, saw potential in the human resistance and began offering covert support. The Empire had fought itself unchallenged, but now it was beginning to feel the weight of a galaxy in flux. In the capital, the Council began to grow uneasy. The latest report from Imperial intelligence confirmed that humanity's strikes were no longer isolated incidents. They were coordinated, and the humans were systematically targeting Imperial infrastructure across dozens of systems. This wasn't just a handful of rogue rebels or pirates. They were becoming a full-fledged insurgency. Admiral Haxar, still reeling from his previous defeat, was summoned again to brief the council on the situation. The tension in the room was palpable as he relayed the news. "They learn faster than we can teach them," he said, his voice strained. "Their fleets are improving. Their tactics are unpredictable. And they're starting to unite with other species against us." The council listened, their faces grim. The war that they had once believed would be a simple matter of crushing a rebellious upstart was spiraling into something much more complicated. The Empire was losing its grip on its outer territories, and the humans were only growing bolder. Every attack was like a spark igniting a larger fire, a fire that was spreading faster than they could contain it. "They are unstoppable," Haxar concluded, his words hanging in the silence that followed. "We may have underestimated them, but we can no longer afford to make that mistake. The humans are a force, and they are not going to stop until they break us." The council exchanged glances. The time for dismissing humanity was over. The Empire had been wrong, and now they had to act. But the question remained: could they still crush this growing resistance, or had they already let the storm grow too strong? The Empire's response was swift but calculated, born from a mixture of pride and frustration. The Council could no longer ignore the threat posed by humanity, and the urgency of the situation demanded immediate action. The resources that had once been dedicated to smaller conflicts and exploration were now diverted to the war against humanity. A grand strategy was put into motion: wipe out the human resistance, crush their colonies, and eliminate any trace of rebellion in the Outer Rim. The Council made it clear that the humans were to be dealt with decisively. This time, no mistakes. Admiral Haxar, who had been publicly humiliated by the defeat against the human convoy, was now tasked with leading a full-scale military campaign. His pride had been wounded, and the order to eradicate humanity gave him a new sense of purpose. He was determined to regain the Empire's honor and erase the stain humanity had left on the Empire's reputation. His fleet, reinforced with some of the Empire's most advanced warships and elite soldiers, was ready to strike at the heart of the human resistance. The campaign began with brutal efficiency. Imperial forces, numbering in the tens of thousands, swept across the Outer Rim, annihilating human colonies one by one. Entire systems were bombarded from orbit, their cities reduced to ash in the wake of the Empire's firepower. The message was clear: resistance would not be tolerated. Any human who dared to fight back would be erased. But once again, the Empire underestimated humanity's resolve. In the face of overwhelming force, the humans did not crumble. They fought harder. Their colonies, though devastated, did not surrender. Instead, they united in ways the Empire had not predicted. Cities that were left in ruins became battlegrounds for humanity's fiercest warriors, and the remnants of the fleet, now bolstered by desperate civilians and military officers, launched a guerrilla war against the invaders. The humans' adaptability was their greatest weapon. They struck where the Empire was weakest, often attacking Imperial command ships or military bases deep behind enemy lines. They used their knowledge of terrain, resources, and tactics to their advantage, forcing the Empire's forces into an ever-tightening vice. A small band of human pilots, operating from hastily rebuilt fighter bases on asteroids, took down entire squadrons of Imperial warships using unconventional tactics that baffled the Empire's best commanders. The humans had begun to build a formidable resistance network, spreading like wildfire through the galaxy. And so the battle raged, with each side taking turns gaining and losing ground. The Empire's once impressive fleet now found itself overextended, constantly shifting to deal with threats from all sides. Admiral Haxar's strategies, which had worked so effectively in previous campaigns, began to falter as humanity fought not just for survival, but for something far more powerful: a sense of unity, pride, and purpose that no fleet could defeat. It became clear to the Empire that brute force alone would not win this war. Humanity was not like any species they had faced before. They had something the Empire had never fully understood: an unyielding will to survive and to fight for their freedom, even in the face of certain annihilation. For every ship the Empire destroyed, more would rise in defiance. For every colony the Empire obliterated, another would rally to the cause. The more the Empire crushed, the more the humans seemed to multiply, their determination never wavering. The once dismissed humans had become a tidal wave, crashing against the walls of the Empire's power. And in the Empire's most powerful minds, a terrifying realization began to form. This would not be an easy victory. The humans were not simply fighting for survival. They were fighting to reshape the galaxy, to challenge the very order the Empire had established. The war, once thought to be a fleeting nuisance, was now a full-scale rebellion. And humanity was not going to stop until they had torn the Empire apart. The once thriving capital of humanity's solar system, Mars, now stood as the last great stronghold of resistance against the might of the Galactic Empire. Earth, while still fiercely loyal to its people, had been decimated in previous years of conflict, its cities reduced to rubble by relentless imperial bombardments. But Mars, with its vast underground tunnels, resilient population, and well-fortified defenses, had endured. It became the symbol of humanity's defiance, a beacon of resistance in the darkness of imperial oppression. The Empire knew that as long as Mars stood, the flame of rebellion would never die. Admiral Haxor, who had suffered humiliations in the Outer Rim, was now given command of a decisive operation: the total destruction of Mars. He would not fail again. The Empire had sent its largest and most advanced fleets to crush the human heart of resistance, their orders clear: no mercy. The plan was simple: blockade the planet's atmosphere, suffocate its remaining colonies, and then bomb the surface until there was nothing left but scorched earth. Mars was to be wiped from the map, and with it, humanity's spirit of rebellion. The Imperial Armada entered the solar system with terrifying force. Ships of unimaginable size, weapons capable of turning cities to dust, and legions of soldiers ready to descend on the planet like a storm. For the Empire, this was the final battle, the moment when the human uprising would be extinguished once and for all. No one could stand against the Empire's overwhelming firepower. Certainly not a ragtag group of humans who had managed to survive far longer than they should have. But the humans were ready. Mars had become a fortress. Beneath the surface, entire cities had been constructed in secret, designed for defense and self-sufficiency. The humans had built tunnels that snaked beneath the planet's crust, filled with soldiers, civilians, and engineers who worked tirelessly to fortify their position. The human leadership, once fractured and desperate, now stood united. General Maria Vallon, a former military strategist from Earth, had assumed command of Mars' defense. Her leadership had transformed the humans from a scattered rebellion into a cohesive, organized force. As the Empire's fleet arrived in orbit, Mars erupted into chaos. But it was not the chaos the Empire had expected. The humans did not cower or flee. They'd fought back with everything they had. Their fighters, though small and less advanced than the Empire's warships, were nimble and unpredictable, harassing Imperial patrols and launching surprise strikes against the incoming fleet. They used the rocky surface of Mars itself to their advantage, hiding in craters and mountainous regions, blending in with the terrain in ways that made it nearly impossible for the Empire to pinpoint their forces. The human strategy was not to engage in open space battles. They knew they were outmatched in that regard. Instead, they used guerrilla tactics, ambushing Imperial ships and mining the skies above Mars with devastatingly effective laser traps and EMP weapons that disabled key Imperial systems. The human fleet launched precision strikes against the Empire's massive dreadnoughts, using their smaller, faster ships to exploit weaknesses in the larger ship's armor. On the ground, the humans fought with equal tenacity. The Empire had expected to see human soldiers retreating into bunkers, waiting to be exterminated. But instead, they encountered fierce resistance. Every street, every building, every corner became a battleground. Human soldiers armed with stolen Imperial weapons and improvised explosives defended their home with the ferocity of cornered beasts. The Empire's troops, trained for conventional warfare, found themselves caught in traps, ambushed at every turn. Mars became a battlefield of blood and fire, with each side digging in deeper, unwilling to yield. Admiral Haxar watched in growing frustration as his forces, though vastly superior, struggled to break the human defenses. The humans' resilience was proving more than a match for the Empire's overwhelming firepower. Mars had become a thorn in the Empire's side, and it was clear that even with all their might, the Empire could not easily crush the rebellion. The cost of this battle was mounting, and with every Imperial ship that fell and every soldier that died, the Empire's dominance over humanity seemed less certain. In the heart of Mars' Defense Command Center, General Valen stood before a massive holographic map, calculating their next move. The battle was far from over, and despite the Empire's might, the humans had proven that they were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the future of their kind. And as long as Mars stood, the Empire would never have peace. Humanity was unstoppable, and the Empire was beginning to realize just how true that was. The battle for Mars had become a grinding war of attrition. Weeks had passed, and the once pristine surface of the red planet was now scarred by craters, wrecked infrastructure, and the remnants of countless battles. The Empire's forces, with their superior weaponry and vast fleets, were supposed to crush the human resistance in a matter of days. But Mars had become the unyielding heart of humanity's resolve, and with every passing day, the humans proved themselves more than capable of holding their ground. Admiral Haxar, though brilliant, was finding himself stretched thin. The human fighters, with their unrelenting tenacity and unorthodox tactics, had dealt blow after blow to his fleet. Their hit-and-run tactics, precision attacks, and expertly laid traps had begun to take a toll on his ships. What had started as a straightforward military operation had become a brutal stalemate. The humans were not just defending Mars. They were slowly turning the tide of the war. Haxar's command ship, the Glorious Thunder, had been ambushed by a group of human fighters during a routine patrol around Mars' moons. Though it had survived the assault, the attack had caused significant damage, and the fleet's supply lines were now being regularly interrupted by smaller human vessels. The resources needed to maintain the campaign were dwindling, and the Empire's once invincible technological advantage was starting to falter. The Empire's leadership, in their ever-present arrogance, had still not fully grasped the magnitude of the situation. They continued to issue orders to finish the humans once and for all, believing that the rebellion on Mars would soon crumble under their relentless force. But behind closed doors, the first signs of concern had started to surface. Senior advisors and strategists in the Imperial High Command began to question whether the destruction of Mars was even possible. The longer the campaign dragged on, the more costly it became, and the more certain it became that the humans had not just the ability to resist, but the ability to fight back effectively. It was in this environment of growing frustration and doubt that a new force emerged from humanity's ranks. A loose alliance of ships, once scattered throughout the outer rim and now united under a common cause, began to converge on Mars. These were not just ragtag pirates or mercenaries. They were the vanguard of a growing human fleet that had been quietly assembling and reinforcing Mars' defense efforts. Some had been fighters in the earlier skirmishes. Others had joined from other systems that had felt the Empire's wrath and oppression. Together, they formed a united front, bound not just by a desire for survival, but by the growing realization that humanity was no longer on the defensive. It was now in a position to retaliate. The humans began to counterattack with new vigor. A massive offensive launched by the newly united human fleet hit Imperial ships that had been blockading Mars, forcing the Empire to divide its forces to defend against the simultaneous threats. The human fighters, supported by the makeshift fleet, began to break through the Empire's defenses, causing significant damage to Imperial warships that were already weakened by previous human tactics. On the ground, General Maria Vallon oversaw coordinated attacks against key Imperial installations, using guerrilla warfare to disrupt their supply chains and cripple their military infrastructure. The humans had learned from every previous defeat and adapted their tactics accordingly. The Empire's once imposing superiority was now being met with cunning and resolve that it hadn't anticipated. Haxor, now realizing that the destruction of Mars was no longer a foregone conclusion, called for reinforcements from the core. The Imperial Empire had long prided itself on its unbreakable rule, its unmatched military might, and its ability to crush any and all resistance. Yet, as the war continued, the undeniable truth began to sink in. Humanity was no longer a mere nuisance, no longer an easy target to be swept aside. The spark of rebellion, once ignited on the red surface of Mars, had become an uncontrollable fire, spreading across the galaxy and threatening to engulf the Empire in flames. Admiral Haxor stood in the command room of the glorious Thunder, staring out at the vastness of space, his mind racing. The Empire's fleets were stretched thin, caught in multiple skirmishes and battles with the human forces, and the reinforcements he had called for were still far from arriving. The Empire's once indomitable strength was slipping through its fingers, and with every passing day, the humans grew bolder, more organized, and more relentless. It was as though they had become a force of nature, unpredictable, unstoppable. The Imperial High Command, desperate to regain control, sent urgent orders to Haxor: crush the rebellion. No matter the cost, the humans had to be eradicated. But as Haxor reviewed the directives, something inside him faltered. He had been a loyal servant of the Empire for years, but the more he witnessed of humanity's resolve, the more he began to question the wisdom of their mission. He had watched as entire fleets were destroyed by human ingenuity, as Mars had held out against an onslaught that should have been impossible. And now, with the human resistance growing in strength and numbers, he knew the Empire's grip on the galaxy was slipping away. The final blow came when the humans launched their most audacious attack yet. Using stolen Imperial technology and their growing fleet, they struck directly at the heart of the Empire, its capital, the seat of the Imperial throne. The humans had spent months preparing for this moment, and when the day came, they executed their strike with flawless precision. A small, highly skilled fleet of human ships infiltrated the Empire's outer defenses, using stealth technology and diversionary tactics to bypass the Empire's security measures. They breached the core systems of the Empire's capital and unleashed a coordinated assault on the Imperial Palace itself. The attack was devastating. The palace, once a symbol of the Empire's unassailable power, was reduced to rubble in a matter of hours. The Imperial leadership, scrambling to respond, found itself caught off guard by the sheer ferocity and precision of the human assault. Thousands of Imperial soldiers perished in the chaos, and the throne room, the very heart of Imperial authority, was left in ruins. Admiral Haxor, witnessing the destruction from his command ship, understood the gravity of the situation. The Empire could no longer claim victory. The capital had fallen. The humans had achieved what no one had thought possible. They had brought the Empire to its knees. It was not a sudden collapse, but the inevitable consequence of underestimating their strength, their determination, and their capacity to learn and adapt. The Empire's arrogance had blinded it to the truth. The humans were unstoppable. As the remnants of the Imperial fleet scrambled to regroup, many of Haxor's officers began to question the very foundation of their mission. Whispers spread throughout the ranks that the war was no longer winnable, that the tide had turned irrevocably. Even the once loyal soldiers, who had believed in the Empire's invincibility, now found themselves asking if it was worth fighting for a regime that was crumbling before their eyes. In the wake of the attack on the capital, the humans didn't stop. They began to take control of system after system, liberating worlds that had long been under Imperial rule. Planets that had once cowered under the boot of the Empire now rallied to the human cause. The rebels were no longer scattered. They had become a unified force, and their resolve had only strengthened. The Empire's former allies, the Gorgoth and Zelkaris, began to defect in droves, realizing that their future lay with the humans, not with a fading, broken empire. It was clear now. The Empire had lost. The war was over. Admiral Haxar, once a symbol of imperial strength, looked out at the stars, a heavy weight on his shoulders. He had seen the rise of the humans, their incredible will to survive, and to fight for their freedom. He had been part of the Empire's arrogance, part of the system that had once believed its dominance was eternal. But now he understood. The humans were not just fighting for their survival, they were fighting for something greater, a future in which they, not the Empire, would be the ones to shape the galaxy. And as the last remnants of the Empire's fleet turned in retreat, Haxar knew that humanity's victory was inevitable. They were unstoppable. And with the Empire's fall, the galaxy would never be the